I'd like to now introduce Dr. Natalie Burls from the Atmospheric, Oceanic, and Earth Sciences Department.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here and tell you a little bit about my research. Next slide, please. So the department I'm in is the Atmosphere, Ocean, and Earth Sciences Department. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my research today, but really the students and faculty in our department are doing research on a wide range of topics. I've just sort of put it together here, a summary slide, but it spans both climate science and climate dynamics, to geology and earth system science. And so a range of topics from the ocean's role in climate to paleontology and structural geology and tectonics. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of background in terms of my path to Mason, I'm an oceanographer by training and a climate scientist. I did my PhD at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, so in the Southern Hemisphere where Coriolis force goes the other way. And at the time, I was also at times had the opportunity to go to sea and was lucky enough to visit the very southern tip of our planet, Antarctica. So here's a few photos from that voyage where really it's hard to believe that humans live on this planet. It's such a hostile environment, terribly cold, but the birds rule the earth down there. And so I love this photo. I decided to include this. It reminds me of Madagascar, the movie. And these penguins came up to us thinking, oh, another species, pretty friendly. Oh, wait, no, you're pretty tall. We're not going to come any closer. And then they carried on to check out the ship. But my love for climate science and research took me across hemispheres to the Northern Hemisphere, where Coriolis force now deflects everything to the right, and so it's incredibly confusing. But I've moved out of the sort of seagoing space and into the modeling space, and a lot of my research entails using climate models where we incorporate not only the ocean, but also the atmosphere, the land, and the sea ice and the land ice, and how they all interact to create our climate, the climate that we experience. And now I hang out instead with GMU grad students. Next slide, please. So one of the key questions that my research focuses on is, if humans double the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere from pre-industrial conditions, how much will the Earth warm? And so this is a problem and a question we can tackle with theory and models, but this is also we also have some observational constraints on this. We can look into Earth's history and see how it informs us, right? So my research uses climate models, but also data collected from past climate and past warm climates in Earth's history to understand the physics of this process. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I'm showing you climate records or reconstructions over the last 100 million years. And obviously, the further back we go, the more uncertain the data. But you can see here a very clear story. We have reconstructions of carbon dioxide and how that's evolved. And there's obviously uncertainty on these estimates, as I say, so that's the gray shading we have here on the plot. And then at the same time, we have estimates of the global surface temperature of the Earth. And so as we go back further and further in Earth's history, we can see that CO2 levels were higher. And that kind of goes hand in hand with higher global mean surface temperatures. And it's really in the last 5 million years that we've seen CO2 levels decline below 400 parts per million and to the sort of 200 parts per million, 280 parts per million that we had in pre-industrial times. Now, just because Earth's climate has been warm in the past doesn't mean that it's fine for us to be doing what we're doing right now. And what we're doing right now is shown in the far right of this plot. We're really applying an extreme perturbation in terms of elevations in CO2 concentrations, and we're making them rise very rapidly. And we have the three scenarios here. So in the more extreme case of the more extreme scenario of this sort of referred to often as business as usual, you can see we're taking CO2 concentrations back to values that they were last seen in the Eocene, for example, the early Eocene, where Earth's climate was very radically different. And so I look at data from these, next slide, please. I look at data from these past climates, and I also try to simulate them with climate models and look at interesting things. For example, how different was the oceanic circulation during the Pliocene, which was the last time Earth's temperatures were, Earth's carbon dioxide was at 400 parts per million, but the continents were still pretty much in the same place, which makes it a fairly powerful analog for what we might expect to see in the future Also looking at how the hydrological cycle, where it rains, where there's drought, has changed and how different it was during these past warm climates. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say that we have a lot of research opportunities within our department, not only within the themes of future climate change and paleoclimates, but also the range of other topics that I mentioned earlier. And we have a lot of opportunities for interning through ASIP, the ASIP program, for example, during the summer for both the undergrads and high school students, as well. We have a very vibrant graduate programs in climate science, as well as earth system science, and plenty of opportunities to do research with our amazing faculty. So I'll leave it there.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I know that we have some folks on the line from your department, some students who are currently pursuing your academic programs, and those who just generally have an interest in climate science. So my one question for you, if there's a student who's looking for a faculty member to work alongside, or want to work with someone like you who's doing such interesting work, what is the process for identifying and approaching a faculty member to possibly then continue to work with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a number of different avenues. If you're an undergrad, especially in early stages of your undergrad, you could apply through ASIP, for example, and identify faculty members that you'd like to work with that would be doing a summer research. There's also obviously the research courses associated with our majors, as well as a variety of undergraduate classes, which you could use as a mechanism for meeting faculty. Otherwise, we have our pages, our faculty pages, and you can always feel free to directly reach out via email. Oscar is also another avenue.
Awesome, thank you so much. You posted those two publications that you recently, two studies that you recently done. So I'm actually probably going to grab those and put those on the Science Connect page after this event. So if anyone wants to read more about Dr. Burrell's research, you can go ahead and do that.